Hello, everybody. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on our first official day of Fame Week. We appreciate you coming out. Hope you were able to catch our Quarantine Film Festival earlier today. Put a little comment in the chat if you got to see that. It was a lot of fun. We're so glad you guys are here joining us for our Inside the LAFS Writer Zoom panel. My name is Whitney Braid, and I am the Senior Events Coordinator here at the LA Film School. And one of my favorite things we get to do is have panels and fun events like this. Tonight we have two authors that I'm extremely honored to have joining us to share a little bit about their projects and their process. We have with us Nathan Pettyjohn and Morgan Sandler. We also have moderating our very own Joe Byron, the Director of Alumni Relations. So just want to share with you a little bit about Nathan and Morgan and what they've been up to, give you a little bit of an introduction on them. So Nathan Pettyjohn is an author, talent manager, and entrepreneur. Nathan's a contributing writer for Forbes on topics relating to what business leaders need to know about innovations in media and technology. Good guy to know. Nathan is also the co-author of a short tactical guide, Zen and the Art of Admin Tasks, about outsourcing and administrative work. In 2011, Nathan founded Corduroy, a digital strategy agency based in Los Angeles, where he serves as CEO. Nathan also has some exciting news coming up. He wrote his first longer book during quarantine this year, and that is going to be coming out in the next 2 weeks. So he's going to share with us a little bit about that. And Morgan, some of you may know Morgan. Morgan Sandler is a professor of digital film production at the University of Laverne here in Southern California. Although he teaches a wide array of classes, he specializes in film production and theory. His love of visual storytelling and creating powerful images guides his teaching and curriculum, as does his passion for education. Previously, he helped design the digital cinematography program at California State University, Los Angeles, where he also served as an adjunct professor. He also previously served as course director of cinematography at the Los Angeles Film School, where he taught for 10 years. Morgan has spent nearly 20 years working professionally as a cinematographer and camera operator for the film and television industries, which he continues to do when outside of the classroom. Morgan holds an MFA in film, television, and theater from the California State University of Los Angeles. Morgan is also an avid landscape photographer, enjoys traveling with his family and documenting their journeys, and the proud husband and father of two wonderful daughters, Stella and Eleanor. So one of the best things to hear. And we are honored to have both of these gentlemen here sharing a little bit of their stories with us. And now I'm going to give it over to Joe Byron, who will be moderating the discussion this evening, and I'm going to be here as well. If you guys have any questions, put them in the chat or the Q&A. We're going to have some opportunity to go over those near the end. So we look forward to hearing from you guys. Thank you again for being here tonight.
Thanks, Whitney. Hey, everybody. We are celebrating Fame Week. It's our 21st anniversary of the school. And every year we set aside a week where we're kind of opening ourselves to the public. We're talking about, bragging about our graduates, talking about our programs, and just kind of letting the world know what the school's all about. This year's a different year, you know, with the pandemic, with the changes that we've had to make. We're doing this a little bit differently, but we're really, really excited that we're able to bring you this this particular event. These two guys, know them both. They're both students of the school, and they have had success in publishing books, writing and publishing books. And it's a really, really difficult thing to put a book together. One of the things that I've discovered is that, you know, while we're in the film and entertainment industry and we make movies and TV shows and we create music, those things are about everything we know. You know, those things, they can be about religion, they can be about science, they can be about history. There's stories involved, and I have found that we've had a couple of dozen of our students who have published books, and it's something that I'm really, really in awe of. You know, when I was growing up, there were a bunch of things that I loved. I loved movies, I loved books, I loved music, and I like food now, but food wasn't quite as important to me then, but those things are really important to me. So I'm really happy that we're going to get a chance to talk with these guys. Nathan, let's start with you. Nathan, as Whitney said, Nathan uh, uh, put out a book on, it was Zen in the Art of Admin Tasks that did extremely well on Amazon. And then I discovered that he'd been writing articles for Forbes magazine. Now, Forbes magazine is quite an impressive publication. And I read his articles and I thought, wow, this is really stuff that's important. It is succinct. It is amazingly well written. It's not a film, it's not a screenplay, but it's amazing stuff. So Nathan, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey from when you came to LA Film School to establishing your company Corduroy, and your jaunts into bookmaking and publication.
Sure. Well, thank you for those kind words. I'm happy to be here. My first real job out of LA Film School was as an assistant to a producer named Robert Lawrence, and he and I are still really close and good friends, and work together on some stuff. But while I was working for him doing development, I was reading a lot of scripts, talking to a lot of writers and sending them notes. And I don't know, I think I just got a little disenchanted that because I had written, a number of short stories and scripts by then, but once I started reading really good stuff, I just kind of thought maybe I just need to read for a while. And also I was talking to, some writers like Ron Bass, who has, a lot of success, and then other writers that were just they were really good writers, but they were scraping by and, working another job as a realtor or whatever in another state. And, it just kind of became clear that I probably needed something to pay the bills while I figure this out. So that was 10, 11 years ago, but I started Corduroy to do digital marketing. It's kind of like a lifestyle business where I've never had, tons of clients, but we have enough to, be able to write in the spare time or be able to go do things, be able to go travel. And through that, a lot of things have happened. I've been able to write articles, and then I submitted some of those articles, one of them to Forbes that they liked, about the fake Russian that I made. So that was the first one that I got in there at 2017. And yeah, since then, I just kind of write whenever I have a good idea. It's been a few months. I'm supposed to write every month, but I don't think I have enough good ideas to write 2 articles a month for them. So that was kind of the process of getting the Forbes column. But yeah, as far as Corduroy, a lot of it comes around full circle, and I'm a talent manager now for one woman who's an executive. Janice Bryant Howroyd was the first African-American woman to own $1 billion company. She built it and owns it, and no one really has heard of her at that point. So I started managing her social media and putting content together and podcasts, and helped her with her book, and helped some other clients with their books to self-publish. And so I kind of got to know that nonfiction process of how to put together a memoir, how to self-publish it, how to market it. And there's a lot of different services that, can help with that and make sure that it's a #1 Amazon bestseller and those kind of things. And that's part of the reason why I did that Zen and the Art of Admin Tasks book about outsourcing emails, was to just kind of explain, I made it #1 bestseller and got, reviews and stuff like you mentioned. But this latest book that I'm about to release is probably more of a real book, in my opinion, because that one was so short, and this is kind of a real story.
Great. I want to come back to you about being a reporter for Forbes, but Morgan, tell us how you got into this crazy business.
Hey, Joe. Thank you all for having me. So, yeah, my journey was a little nonlinear. I was a student at the LA Film School in 2003, and after that, moved to New York and started my career as a camera operator and cinematographer, and joined the International Cinematographers Guild, and everything was going according to plan, or at least I thought what the plan was that I had laid out for myself. until I met my wife, which threw a giant monkey wrench in everything in the best possible way. She was also from Los Angeles and decided she wanted to move back, which of course meant, you know, I was coming with her. And so I kind of had to start over again. And so, you know, I approached Joe, who I had known from my time as a student at the LA Film School, and asked if they had any classes that needed to be taught. And it started, I started teaching there in 2006, just teaching one class, which was a camera assisting workshop, teaching how to load film and change magazines, things like that. And, you know, I had really no interest in teaching. I knew that my career path was to be a filmmaker. And I taught my first class and completely fell in love with teaching. It's the only thing I had ever found that I loved more than making films. And, you know, from the very first day, and I used to have this huge fear of public speaking. And so it went against every fiber of my being to stand in front of people and speak. And, you know, I had like a full blown panic attack the first class I taught, but I knew I loved it and I knew I wanted to keep doing it. So with a lot of mentoring from Joe, who, you know, for those of you who don't know Joe, I'm sure everybody knows Joe, but Joe is, to me, and always will be, the heart and soul of the Los Angeles Film School. Joe is the reason that the Los Angeles Film School has thrived for so many reasons. And I have such admiration for him. And I remember sitting in Joe's office and just saying, Joe, you know, how realistic is this? I want to teach. What kind of degree should I get? And as a direct result from conversations with Joe, I went back to school and got a master's in fine arts degree in film production, and have devoted my career to teaching. I decided that's what I wanted to do. I still make films. I still shoot commercials and music videos, but my life and career is now dedicated to being a professor. As for my book was a direct result of my teaching. I didn't have any aspirations to write a book, but I couldn't find a book that I really liked. I couldn't find a book that taught when I teach, I like my students to have fun. I like it to be energetic. I like it to be approachable. And so I wanted to write a book that I felt covered all the topics that I want to discuss, but in a really approachable manner. And so that was my goal with my book. And, you know, again, I think it was more out of necessity than anything else.
Thank you for those kind words, Morgan. But you are my hero. You are really my hero. I'm so proud of what you do. Nathan, I want to ask you a little bit more about Forbes. Now, back when I was writing, and I was writing my critical essays, and I was writing short stories, and I was writing poetry, and I was sending this stuff out to all the major magazines, the New Yorker and magazines like that. And, you know, if I was lucky, I got back a little card that said, "We're not what we're interested in." And maybe of 100 that I submitted, I got back one letter saying, "I'm sorry, but it's not what we're looking for," okay? You have managed to set yourself up as a contributing writer for a major magazine. How did you get their attention? How did you fit into that slot? How did that all work? What were the mechanics of it? Tell us.
Probably my biggest advice is just having thick skin and being able to take that kind of rejection, because there's a lot of it being a writer. I sent this article that I mentioned. It's called How to Create Your Own Fake Russian. It's like I made a guy named Ivan Stravinsky because there was Russian and election interference kind of stuff in the news. So I thought it would be just clever to make a fake Russian guy and get him a bunch of followers online. So I wrote a piece about it, and it came together really well. And, you know, I've had some articles on my own blog that had done pretty well in the past, but I just kind of knew writing it, because it almost wrote itself, that it would be good somewhere. So I submitted it to everywhere you can think of, like, you know, Inc. and Fast Company and Entrepreneur and all of those. And probably a month went by, nobody got back to me. I was just about to just publish it on my own blog, and then I got a response from the editors at Forbes that they liked it. So they posted it, and then maybe 2 or 3 months later, they offered me the contributing column. But it was really just about persistence and not getting, disenchanted when you get rejection, because there's a lot of it. Even with this new book, like trying to send it out to people, like offering them a free copy, and some people, you know, might not even respond or something. And it's like, you just have to not take it personally and just keep going forward. So that's, I think, persistence and having some thick skin has been some of my biggest advice.
Had you submitted articles or stories before to other publications?
No.
So it was the first time?
Yes.
I hate you. Just kidding, of course. That's really amazing. So the first time you basically send out, without representation, an article, it gets picked up by Forbes, and then 2 months later you're offered a position as a contributing writer. That is like amazing. You know, it tells me that the writing is so good it speaks for itself. It's really a Cinderella story.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Morgan, okay, your book, what, you said that you wrote it because you wanted to, couldn't find a text that you needed in your class, but the book that you wrote is an interesting book. It's not a book of technology, it's a book of telling stories, right? Tell us about the process, how you came up with the idea and how you pursued that idea. What kind of thick skin did you have to have?
Sure. You know, I think for me, when I was writing the book, so many of the books I had read explained how to accomplish the techniques, right? This is what you do for a push-in. This is what you do when you're dollying out. This is a zoom in. So the technical elements, but they didn't really explain what was happening to the audience on an emotional level when you do that, right? Because again, as audience members, we're never going to articulate, or at least untrained audience members, we're never going to articulate, oh, well, this push-in means that we're being drawn into this emotional space, but we feel it on an emotional level. And so it was really important to me to discuss the emotions behind the decisions we make, because that's what films are about. That's what stories are about. It's all about the emotion. And so I really wanted to create something that would delve a little bit deeper into what decisions we were making, and more importantly, why we were making those decisions. And so I actually ended up, it was a complicated process. It has the book, which I haven't finished. The book's completed and published and has been out for a while. But we're in the process of building a website for the supplemental material. So what we did is, when we were writing the book, if you look at the images in the book, they're all taken from a film that we shot after I finished the book. So we shot a silent film. It's a 15-minute silent film, just all visuals. And we actually had 2 films shooting at the same time. So we shot the narrative story, and then we had a second film crew filming us, filming the initial movie. So when we discuss a concept in the book, again, I'll go back to the example of a push-in. With the supplemental material that'll be out soon, you see what the shot looks like in the movie, and then in the corner, there's a smaller frame that shows you what the crew is doing to accomplish that. So we see what the move is, and then what it does to the audience on an emotional level. And so for me, I wanted it to be something really interactive. That's the direction most publishing is heading these days.
What about the process? So you've got this idea for a book. Where do you go with it? What do you do with it? What do you do with an idea?
I sat down and I started writing. And I know that sounds simple, but I formulated my chapters, and I wrote the entire book, believe it or not, before I ever tried to submit it to a publisher. A lot of people told me, write a sample chapter and submit it and try to get an advance, and then you can finish the rest of the book. But I actually wrote the entire book before I ever submitted it to any publishers. And then I submitted it to my first choice of publisher, and got, we were discussing before, I got pretty far along in the process, and it ended up not working out. So I went to my second choice for publishers, which I guess they don't know they were my second choice, but they do now. And I sent them a sample chapter, and they loved it, and they made me an offer that same day. But it's a difficult process. It's scary. I mean, and it takes a long time, at least it did for me, just to get over those hurdles of who you speak to and who you get in contact. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's definitely doable.
So you wrote the book first. How did you deal with the format? I mean, did you have pictures pasted on a page? Well, obviously, it was not done electronically, digitally. I mean, how did you put this together? How did you know how to do that? You were a filmmaker, not a bookmaker.
I was definitely not an author, but I knew at that point I had been teaching for probably 7 or 8 years, maybe even longer than that. And I knew what in the courses that I taught, I knew what I needed my students to learn. By the time they were finished with my course, I knew what my learning outcomes needed to be, or their learning outcomes needed to be. And so each chapter is based on one of those outcomes. So it's not your traditional camera or lens. They're all kind of mixed together, but in different elements of visual storytelling. So using the camera as a storytelling tool, rather than just the technical elements of a camera. So I knew what the outcomes needed to be, and I just went chapter by chapter and wrote them. When I shot the film to accompany it, I had already storyboarded out actually I already finished the book, and so I had a long list of every image that I needed for the book, and so I made sure to shoot all of those. Of course, I didn't get them all. We never do, but yeah, I did my best.
Cool. I want to come back to that, but I want to get back to Nathan for just a little bit.
Yeah.
Nathan, when you were at the LA Film School, 2009, I think you were there from, I think, January to December. It was the first year that we had the degree program. What was your major? What was your study? What was your interest then? And what did you do when you first left the school? Where did you get the idea for your own company at Corduroy?
Well, film, and I mean, I knew I liked screenwriting and writing and development. I got that job as the assistant to Robert Lawrence. And I think how I came up with the idea of the company, we came up with like a sizzle reel for some kids show, and we pitched it at that time to like Disney and Nickelodeon, and there weren't a whole lot of all like other options at the time. So those two passed. We had nothing else to do with the sizzle and the other content we had made. So I just made some social media accounts for the show, promoted them a little bit, and I was just like, all right, it's a web series now. And a friend of mine, Todd, was just like, oh, wow, you know how to do all this? He's like, I know several companies that need exactly this. And so he kind of suggested that I should go start a company. And he was a huge Pearl Jam fan, so he came up with the name Corduroy also, because that's one of their songs. And then he made the first couple introductions, and that was in 2011. So I was like 21, 22, and just kind of started it and learned a lot as I went to build this company. And now, as a talent manager for such a successful businesswoman, like I've learned so much from Janice, about how to run a business and things like that. That's really helped me the last few years.
When I think of your name, I think of Corduroy, and I can see your logo. I think it's because on social media, and maybe when I've looked you up or followed you on the internet, they seem to be together a lot. So obviously you've worked a lot in terms of establishing that brand. What was involved in doing that?
Yeah, and I've written some articles about why social media is terrible and why you should get off social media and those kind of things, but I make my money on social media marketing. So I don't have a personal Facebook account. I deleted my Snapchat and TikTok and a lot of different things. But I do have a public figure page where I can share articles and things. And there's probably 5 or 6 other Nathan Pettyjohns, and one of them's a musician. And if you're uploading media, that's going to show up higher in search. So I've made it a concerted effort to like, how do I show up and how do people find me? And if you Google my name now, like the first page of results is all me. So it's just kind of been like, it wasn't an overnight thing. It was just kind of like a thoughtful, deliberate plan.
And when did you start writing articles about media and social media, et cetera, et cetera?
A lot of probably then, like 2011 when I started the company, I think I tried sticking with things that I kind of knew about. Like I had done a lot of stuff with product placement. Even my thesis film at LAFS had like Dr. Pepper in it and things like that. And then I actually did work on a couple of independent films helping them with their product placement. So I wrote an article called How to Get Product Placement in Your Indie Film. And that article did really well. I tried to find other topics like that I knew enough about, and to just go share a bunch of like just basically give the information away for free, and then people would see me as an expert and want to hire me. But that's kind of been the strategy. And writing articles will, I mean, you still have a beginning, middle, and end, so it's still kind of telling a story, and it's good practice, that or short stories or anything like that.
When I was writing critical essays, it was normally for a purpose, like to get through a class or to impress somebody. It would never have occurred to me to write an article without knowing who it was going to be for, and what its place would be in that media. So, is there anything you could say about just kind of like this how to create a Russian, how the genesis of that came about?
And I don't know really why I made the Russian guy. There was a lot of fake news stuff going on, and I know a lot of the kind of tricky tactics that people use to get fake followers and make things look legitimate online. So I just wanted to call attention to that. And a lot of the stuff in that article, and it was only 3 years ago, but a lot of that stuff in that article has already kind of changed. Like the bots that I used on Twitter and LinkedIn don't exist anymore, or they're banned. And a lot of stuff's changed already, not because of my article, but it did help kind of call attention to some of those things.
Folks, both of these guys have successful careers, which they've established in different ways and going in different directions, but they have some things in common, which I think is really fascinating and interesting. Let's get back to Morgan, though. Morgan, tell me about some of the difficulties you had once you had the publisher. Tell us about your relationship with the publisher and what you had to, compromises you had to make, things like that.
So yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting process working with any publisher, because they have an idea in their mind of exactly what they want, and I had an idea in my mind of what I wanted. And so for me, it's interesting because after things fell apart with the first publisher, I left LA Film School and I got this tenure track professor position at the University of Laverne. And so the book kind of went on the back burner, and I revisited the book about 2 years later, year and a half, 2 years later. And I realized I'm my own worst critic. I think, like all artists, I hate everything I've ever shot and I hate everything I've ever written. And so I reread the book and I thought, oh, this book's just awful. And so I decided I was going to rewrite the entire book, essentially. So I went chapter by chapter. But the process with the publisher was pretty smooth from the beginning. I did make a huge concession, and part of it was my choice. My book, there are a couple chapters where the images are in color, and the rest of the chapters are black. The images are black and white. And that was an option I was given by my publisher. I teach at a university, we're a Hispanic serving institution, and we're predominantly middle class students. Like I think like many college students, and I see the books that I was asking my students to purchase, and a lot of times they're $150 to $350 for the book, and I think that's unfair to do to students. So I was given the option on having an all color book, which would have been priced about $150, or having a book partially in color and then other parts in black and white, and the book is about $35. And I went with that option just because, again, for me, I want my book to be accessible. I want it to be something that a beginning filmmaker or an intermediate filmmaker can purchase, can get their hands on, and can digest it. And so I didn't want to price new filmmakers out of the book before they even got an opportunity to read it. So that was really important to me. But I think that was the major concession. It's an interesting process because some chapters I absolutely thought were fantastic in the book, and the publisher asked me to go back and rewrite, and then vice versa, right? There were some that I thought were not that great, but they were married to and wanted them to stay.
Right. Nathan, you wrote Zen and the Art of Admin Tasks, which you said was like kind of a thin book, which you marketed well and sold well, and it's an amazing book. I have a copy. Then you became a contributing writer for Forbes magazine, and now you've written something else. It's like a memoir. It's something that's a little bit more narrative based, and obviously a lot more personal. So tell us about how that fits into the whole scheme of you and your company and your career, and what it all means to you.
Yeah, I think the first book was kind of about how I outsource a lot of stuff, and it's about how I use routine or templates and everything for an admin to answer emails for me and stuff, which is kind of what enabled me to start traveling more the last couple of years. I did a couple trips. Then last year, I had recently read Travels with Charlie by Steinbeck, and I'd gone through a breakup. I wanted to get out of town, and I had this dog that was like a puppy. So I was like, well, I could do an RV trip. So I took the trip last October, and I wasn't planning on writing a book. I think when I got to like halfway through the trip, I kind of started taking notes and writing things about who I'd met and some of the different stories. But then I got back at the end of October, didn't really touch it or do much with it until like March, April, when quarantine hit. And then I sat down and really wrote it out, and it was kind of cathartic, like selfish reasons to just kind of like relive the experiences of being out on the road and not stuck at home, because April was like when the beaches were closed and everything was closed. So yeah, I mean, part of writing this new book was kind of just for like selfish reasons, but I do think it kind of builds off the previous book because of, the first one kind of explains how I was able to travel and go out on the road and work remotely. And then this one is just kind of an example of 3 weeks of my life on the road with my dog.
Yeah, it's amazing that you can write about 3 weeks of your life. Writing is very difficult, as writers know. There's normally, a lot of ideas. Sometimes you don't know where things are going, or how they're going to, where they're going to go, or who's going to be interested in the things that you have to say. It seems like you turned this around very, very quickly. Did you have any issues or problems in terms of editing, rewriting, all those things that writers need to do with works of this kind?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm self-publishing, so I don't have very much patience. I was probably ready to publish it in May, but I made myself practice some patience. I wrote out the whole first draft during April of this year, and then I sent a copy to a friend of mine, and then I didn't read it for like a month, and then he sent me his notes at the end of April, and then in May I kind of dove back in. I did a couple different passes, but there was a book by Ryan Holiday called Perennial Seller. I'm a big fan of. I've listened to the audiobook several times because he talks about how to make and market works that last. It's a really good resource. But he gives the advice to write it with a really specific audience in mind. So I wrote this newest book with like my buddy Jacob that I grew up with in mind as the potential reader, thinking like he likes some of the stuff that I've written, and I will just write it with like him in mind as the audience. So I think that, that's Ryan Holiday's advice, but I think it's really good advice to write with a very, very specific audience in mind to begin with.
Great. Okay. Back to Morgan. Morgan, you got a new publisher, and you worked out the things that you wanted to work out. They published the book. You have to promote the book, right? Talk about promotion. That's a big part of this whole process.
Promotion's tough and kind of my worst nightmare. From like I said, public speaking and schmoozing and networking has always been one of the things I've struggled with the most. It's just not in my nature. It's also, publishing and writing and speaking engagements are part of my tenure process. I just actually received tenure this last year. So speaking at conferences. So I speak at NAB every year and BEA and give lectures there. And that's all part of the book promotion process. I was in London last summer and spoke at the International Conference of Film Studies, I believe it was called, and I gave a presentation about my book there and actually won the first prize for best presenter. So I'm getting more comfortable each time. I love, what's always saved me, if I have to go into a social situation and make small talk, it's terrible. But when I'm talking about something that I love, and teaching and film are two of my passions. So when I have that as my crutch, when I have that to talk about, it's so easy for me. And so I love getting up on the stage now and going to these speaking engagements and discussing the book because I'm passionate about it.
Your passion made you one of our most popular teachers ever. Everyone has really, really great memories of you and your classes. I have a whole lot more questions, but I don't want to hog all the time. Whitney, do you have any questions you want to throw in? Or maybe you've been collecting some of the questions from our other listeners. We have a bunch of them out there.
Yeah, I have a few of each. I have a couple of my own, and then definitely some we've gotten in the chat. Thank you guys for sending those. Keep them coming. But I would love to know, you both maintain pretty full other careers, right? So Morgan, you teach and you still do cinematography, and obviously in addition to being father and a husband and all that, and Nathan, you run your business, the CEO. So how, talk to me a little bit about how making the time to write happened and how you got, I know Morgan, you mentioned there was a need, you really saw the need for this book, and but how sort of, let me know the process, I guess I'm interested in, of how you actually made the time and sat down and what that looked like when you have so much else going on.
Sure, yeah, I can answer from my perspective. I have the most incredible wife in the world. So she bought me, this is her office behind me. I have my lovely office on the Laverne campus, but I can't go there. So she works from home, and so she's been sharing her office with me. But when the process came for me to rewrite my book, she bought me a table and put it in our guest bedroom and said, "This is your office. Go in here and write." And she would keep our, like I said, I have a 7 and a 10-year-old daughters. And so she would keep the girls active and busy and just let me sit there and plug away and work all day long on the book. And had I not had that support, had I not had my wife there to really have my back and be my partner in that, I don't think I ever would have been able to finish the book. It's difficult to balance all of those elements of your life. But when I decided to go back to school, my mother-in-law gave me the best piece of advice I've ever received. She said, the next 4 years are going to pass, and it's actually 7 years because it's MFA, but the next 4 years of your life are going to pass either way. When those 4 years are up, you could have an MFA at the end of it, or you could not. So you make the decision of what's going to work for you. But I think that was the best advice I ever received. Life is short, and if we don't go after what we want, yes, there's going to be hard work. Yes, there's going to be challenges, but push yourself. And at the end of the day, it's such an incredible feeling. I remember the first galley copy I got of my book, like the proof of my book, and it was the most incredible feeling in the world. And so, I will continue to push myself, and I think I've got one more book in me before I end my career as an author. That's
such great advice. Thank you for sharing that. Nathan, what have you found that's been helpful? How did you do this?
I like Morgan's answer. I think it's still something I need to work more on. I don't have enough consistency of writing every day, but for this new book, I didn't have such a heavy workload during April and quarantine. And I don't have a wife and kids, so I think it was probably a little easier for me to take that time on this one. But yeah, I think it's got to be a matter of just making the time every day. What are you doing after 6 o'clock at night? You're just going to watch Netflix and sit on the couch, or work on something that inspires you. So I think finding that thing that inspires you is probably the hard part.
Yeah, and resisting that urge when Netflix is looking good. I know it's hard. Some of our questions. So we had somebody who was asking about the difference. I know we're talking more about books and articles and different types of writing, but a good question, and maybe Morgan, in your teaching, you can help us with this one. Difference between a screenwriter and a director. It seems like a lot of people take on both roles. And what can be the difference if you're directing someone else's project versus you wrote your own and you're directing?
That's a great question. I'd be happy to give an answer to that, and I'm sure, Joe, you have an answer as well. It's interesting because the role of director and screenwriter are completely different jobs that sometimes are occupied by the same person. So there are some writers who direct their own work, which in the beginning of your career is not always necessarily an easy thing to do. But the screenwriter is the person who's putting pen to paper. They're writing the words that the actors are saying. The director, I always like to say, is the director is the person that's bringing that to life visually, right? So the director is not necessarily the person, or they're not the person writing what the actors are saying, but they are the person that's choosing the frame. They're choosing the composition, when the camera moves, where the actors go, and they're putting intention behind a lot of those, the words that come from the screenwriter.
Fantastic. And thank you, Alexandra, sent that question in. And we have another from Caitlin. She wants to know, what advice do you have for students who are currently attending LAFS? What can current students be doing? Nathan, any suggestions on this one? Anything you found was helpful as a student? Or
Reading a lot and writing a lot, even if it's short stories or essays or poems or books or scripts. Easy to read a short story every night. I would encourage maybe that, or try to write short stories. Writing a story is writing a story. Takes a lot of practice.
that's great advice. Yeah. And then last I see here in the Q&A, how early what is too early as a student to start sending out portfolios and pitches to prospective studios and other places you might want to pitch your work to, publishing houses, things like that? How early is too early? And Joe, you may have some insights on this too. So from Alexandra. Thank you guys for sending in these questions.
I would say it depends upon the material. Nathan wrote an article which obviously sold, which was purchased by a major magazine. Obviously, it was a very, very good article. So if the material's good, the material will sell itself. If the material's not good, then you're wasting your time. You have to understand that when you're writing, and I'm thinking primarily as like a fiction writer, your first, or a screenwriter, your first line and your first page have to be the best thing that you've ever written. And the next page has to be better than that. And so on and so on and so on. Or as they say, it's turtles and elephants all the way down. Mm-hmm. So it's too early if the material's not good. And to know whether or not the material's good normally depends upon utilizing teachers, utilizing associates, going to writers groups, getting beta readers. There's a lot involved in it. The one thing is, like everything else in the world, the more you do it, the better you get. And I would say that a writer who loves the process of writing, loves doing it. And it doesn't matter if you're writing a technical book or an essay or a book of poetry. If you can't wait to sit down to do it and you want people to be affected by it, if you do that over and over and over again and don't quit, you will eventually find the right time and you'll be successful in that area. It's very easy to quit though.
That's great advice, Joe. Really good.
Whitney, would it be possible along those same lines to add something to a previous question just about what current students should do? Just from my own painful experience at the LA Film School, and it was not painful because of the school, it was painful because of myself. I don't think I was mature enough yet to devote the time that I should have. Like sometimes I wish I could go back and re-attend the Los Angeles Film School because there's so much knowledge there. And you have so many incredible instructors there that I wish I could go back and take that all in again. But, if I was going to give one piece of advice to current LA Film School students, just be present every second that you can, because it goes so fast. I mean, it's such a condensed program that if you say one day, well, I was out too late last night, I'm going to miss this class today, you're going to miss so much stuff. So be present while you're there, and every opportunity you get, no matter what concentration you choose. If you want to be a writer, write consistently. If you want to be a cinematographer, when I finally started to realize in grad school that I wanted to be a cinematographer, I took a camera and lights home every single day, and I would just practice lighting everything that I could. So while you have access to the equipment, while you have access to the instructors, take advantage of that and be present.
That's huge. Yeah. Thank you, Morgan. And we just got a question from Zach that I think is really, really interesting. Maybe Nathan, you can help us with this and a little bit in your wheelhouse here. Has there been a time, especially writing articles or pieces for other publications, where you've been asked to write about something that's maybe not your area of interest or something that's not necessarily a passion? And how do you handle that? And what do you do in that case when it's sort of more of a job?
Well, I get to just kind of write about what I want to write about, but I do get pitched stuff all the time. And I know a couple other writers and magazines, and I think, if you're the one reaching out, I think that, like, if you have a film or a project that you want someone to write about, I do think it's more beneficial if you reach out directly and your passion shows through and say, like, this is my project that I just wrote. And like, if you do that research for the kind of writers that have covered that kind of stuff before, rather than like a PR firm or something that most people think that they need, because that, isn't coming directly from you. So it's a lot more personable. So sometimes I'll consider when people pitch me ideas and stuff. But most of the articles that I've written have just been kind of things that I thought were interesting and I wanted to write about.
Again, I got to reiterate Joe's jealousy. That's wonderful to get to focus on those areas of interest. And they happen to be your areas of expertise, so it's perfect. Zach is also asking, and this is kind of a neat thing to muse on, do you guys think handwriting will become obsolete with all the technology? Of course, everybody is on the computer. Do you think we'll still be doing any writing by hand? Maybe Joe? Joe makes beautiful pens, in case anybody didn't know. So I hope for his sake that the writing sticks around.
They said vinyl was dead, and vinyl's still around. So yeah, I mean, not only will people still be writing by hand, but we haven't seen the ends of books either, okay? And there's nothing like the visceral tactile feeling of having paper in your hands and being able to turn the page at your leisure, making sure the writing's right and your glasses are okay. So I think that's here to stay. I wanted to comment a bit on the work that you're doing, Nathan. The latest article that you wrote for Forbes was called "The Event Horizon of Truth." And I want to encourage everyone out there to go on the website and read this article, because it's an amazing article about things that are happening in our society that have to do with things that are very, very relevant in our time. And these are things that include the politics of the world around us, which are having a huge effect on us, as well as the coronavirus and social media and communication. When I was a kid, I couldn't wait for the future because I wanted to live in the future. I wanted to be teleported, I wanted to fly, I wanted to do all these kind of things. And I was a little bit disappointed when 2000 rolled around and I was 50 years old, and I thought, the future doesn't seem that much different than what the future seemed like back in the 60s, but I was wrong. The future had changed a lot in terms of communication technology, and the processing of ideas and other data. And that's what Nathan's article is all about. And once again, it's a long question, it's a long statement, but in order to put things like this in perspective, it requires a knowledge of a lot of different things. When we write screenplays, when we write stories, we write about everything we know about. We write about religion, we write about philosophy, we write about science, we write about psychology, and we combine those all in our own voice, and that's what creates unique and wonderful things for other people to read. Nathan, you were able to combine all of these things. Where did you get the training and the knowledge? How did you manage to combine Marshall McLuhan and cosmology together into one article?
Well, I mean, I guess it goes back to my advice earlier about, reading, a short story or an article every day before bed. By the end of the year, you'll have read 300 short stories and you'll have a lot of ideas in your head. But that was the first article that I co-wrote with someone, a guy named Aaron Ray, who's very, very smart. And we had been kind of knocking around ideas. He helped me kind of come up with a topic after the Fire Festival documentaries came out. I wrote an article defending Ja Rule, just because nobody else was going to write an article defending Ja Rule about Fire Festival. So I thought that would be a fun take that people might actually click on. So kind of something that I think is marketable and combines some interesting ideas. I'm really glad that you liked that one. I don't think it has that many clicks on it or anything, but it was something that Aaron and I kind of kicked around. And again, I've got to have thick skin about it because I shared that to the journalism subreddit. And some commenter part one of my paragraphs. So I've always got to learn from that, move on, and try to do better next time. I think the basic premise of that article is just it's impossible to know what's true anymore, and kind of hard to argue with that based on just how much crap is out there and where you're getting your information from. If you're just reading the headlines instead of going deep into something.
For those of you who don't know, Event Horizon, I know a lot about them because I've read so much science fiction. But the Event Horizon is the border between our reality and unreality in the cosmos. It's that kind of place where the black hole becomes the black hole and our world is on the other side of it. And it's really, a border. And our world right now is the information is so obfuscated by so much noise that we're in the danger of losing the truth of things that are really happening, and that is specifically has to do with scientific process and scientific fact. We can't argue with mathematics. I mean, nobody can argue with 2 + 2 is going to equal 4. For some reason, we do argue about science these days. It blows my mind. So I don't want to become too philosophical here. But once again, I want to promote Nathan's story because this gentleman is a very good writer and also has a very good head in terms of what's happening in the world today. Morgan, I want to ask you something, and then I want to go back and see if we can kind of clean up any of the other questions that are out there. When you were a kid, did you ever think that you would end up being A, you already told us you didn't think you would be a teacher, A, in this industry, or B, be able to walk into a bookstore and see a book with your name on the shelf? Tell me about and what it feels like now for that to happen.
It's pretty surreal. So I didn't know, growing up, I was always in my own head. I was always creating films around myself. I was never shooting them, of course, but I always pretended I was in a movie, like I think most kids do. And so I always knew that I wanted to somehow work in the film industry. But there's something that I like to share with my students is I was pretty lost when I was a teenager. I was kicked out of high school when I was 17 and sent to a continuation high school, and I had really no direction and no ambition and didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And in my junior year, I had a teacher. She's actually in the dedication page of my book. Her name was Margie Selke, and Margie was taught a film class there. And she asked us to write a short story, and I wrote a short story. And when I turned it in, she asked me to stay after class the next day and said, "You're a really talented writer. Have you ever thought about pursuing that as a career?" And that was the beginning, really, for me when I realized this is what I want to do. That's the first time it became tangible and something that I could actually put my finger on of a direction I wanted to go. And it just took one person to believe in me. And so for me, that's always my goal with my students. But no, I never saw myself certainly having the success that I've had. I can tell you that one of the most surreal moments of my life was walking into Barnes and Noble in the little town where I live with my wife and my daughters, and my book was on the shelves of Barnes and Noble. I mean, that was, I actually cried when that happened. And so I have a picture of my daughters holding the book inside of a Barnes and Noble. And to me, it's one of the most important pictures that I have. You know, I've had book signings at the Barnes and Noble and a few different Barnes and Noble actually. And it's just such a surreal feeling. I never, you know, again, it's something I always tell my students, because it's so easy to give up on ourselves. It's so easy to say, well, this is too difficult. But, you know, if you're not where you want to be, then your journey's not over, and keep pushing until you get to that point. That's, to me, that's always been my life lesson.
Whitney, any kind of last questions here?
I think we got through our questions. I do have a couple last comments. I'm going to put in the chat the links to find their books as well as Nathan's articles. As Joe said, definitely encourage you guys to check both of those out. And as you might have seen in all the emails for this event, we are also going to be raffling off a copy of each of them. So any student who registered using your student ID, we're going to put you in the raffle, and we will reach out to you via email. So keep an eye on your email, and we'll have a copy of each of those coming out to our 2 winners. So we appreciate you guys coming out tonight. Gonna leave it open for any final remarks from our wonderful guests, but thank you guys so much. It's been wonderful to hear from you.
So Nathan or Morgan, and to all the people that are watching this or will watch it in the reruns, I want you all to support these authors, because they're here in this event because they're doing amazing work, and we are really, really proud of them. And you will get something if you read their works, okay? So please, please, please buy the books, read the books, get them however you can, read those articles in Forbes. You will be delighted. And I want anyone out there who also is thinking about writing or doing something that's significant and interesting, let us know. And Nathan and Morgan, please, please let everyone know where they can find the books.
Yeah.
Pitch.
Mine are on Amazon, and she'll share the link, but I just want to reiterate what Morgan said earlier about being present. And, you know, I only showed my new book to 3 people really for notes, and one of them was a professor I had at LAFS 2 years ago. So there's a lot of value there.
Thank you, Nathan.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to thank you all for having me. It's always, you know, I look for any excuse to get to spend a little bit of time with Joe.
Mm-hmm.
But this was fantastic, Nathan. It's, you know, I haven't seen you in years, and it's so great to see you. And Whitney, you're absolutely fantastic. So I'm honored to be here. It's been such a great experience to visit a place that was such a huge part of my life, at least virtually, for so many years. And you know, my contact information is actually in the back page of the book. I put it there intentionally. So if anybody has any questions, feel free. You're always welcome to email me, you know, get in touch with me. I'm always happy to answer students, answer readers or students, whether it's about filmmaking or publishing or anything like that. I get emails from some of the most unique places I get emails from India. I have a student who actually reached out to me from Africa today, who she wanted some advice. She's in a doctoral program there. And so I love answering those emails. So yeah, just like I said, feel free to always reach out to me, and you know, always pursue your dreams. Don't give up on them.
Very generous offer. Thank you.
Nathan, look forward to your future works. I heard a rumor you're going to be writing a lot more in the future. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm going to try to do a fiction novel next. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much. And thank you guys for coming out to our first day of Fame Week. We appreciate you celebrating with us. Everybody have a wonderful night.
Thank you so much, guys. We're so proud of you.